Right, so for those watching my stream for the first time or watching this on YouTube, this session's basically just going to be a free-form programming session where I work on the kind of middleman game engine that I'm working on for a game that I'm building with my work partner who's a designer. The game itself is going to essentially be an RPG style game, but one where stuff kind of is happening constantly in the background and there's more of a sense of persistence in the game. Currently it's very early days. It's essentially just a terrain system that I'm building currently. I'm hoping that through these videos and through this content, not only does it help me keep on track and keep on going, but also I can share it with people and maybe also get feedback as well while it's being built. So I don't know if anything particularly exciting will happen on this stream, but I'm hoping it will, and I'm hoping that I'll make a lot of good progress, and if some people join me to view, that would be great. Hopefully we can get some good code written. I mean, I don't think anyone can really tell you what good code is, but we'll give it a go. The only thing I'm actually slightly kind of dreading about this is my first real project in Unreal. So the first week or so that I spent just setting everything up and getting things working, it was difficult to say the least, especially when it comes to learning how to do object spawning and that kind of thing. So I'm hoping that once I've got those kind of learning roadblocks out of the way and once things are rolling a little bit more, the whole process should get 10 times easier for me to program, because I'm already a proficient C++ programmer, at least at a basic level. So hopefully progress should speed up substantially, and by the time development is fully underway, I'm hoping that I can get maybe a feature done a day or something meaningful at least that I can then pass on to somebody else to use or somebody else to test, or just something that's kind of, I don't know, meaningful in some way, whatever that means. But the feature that I'm working on currently, and I'll be able to show you this now, is I'm basically just getting the simple terrain brushes working in the code. So currently you've got the simple place one block, got place strips, place cubes, and place planes. Now obviously it looks very laggy at the moment, so I'm not actually doing any object culling or anything like that, but that is a feature that I do want to add and will hopefully be done soon. The brush that I'm working on at the moment are the circular brushes and the spherical brushes and like oval shapes and that kind of thing. So I'll kind of show you what I've already got. So if we open up the controller here, this is a very simple, I would say very basic class. There's not really a lot going on here. In the header itself, it's simply some basic settings which I've not actually utilized yet or done any programming for. They're just there kind of temporarily to kind of remind me what needs targeting later on, and also some basic voxel storage data. So the thinking behind this terrain system so far is that everything is kind of a voxel in the back end, but it's represented by kind of a different style or a different shape. If I go back to the engine again, let's see, we'll go to basic blocks. So these are the kind of foundations that I'm going to be working with. So obviously we've got the standard not cube but half slab that's going to be just the regular voxel shape. But then when doing things like terrain smoothing and joining shapes together, these kinds of shapes will come into play where it makes the terrain look a bit more organic and less chunky. Like it's not supposed to be a Minecraft clone, essentially. What this is supposed to be is its own thing, its own unique engine, and the only reason that it's being built with voxels in the first place is so that we can hopefully down the line offer some kind of editor to the end user, and we wanted that process to be as simple as possible. So it may be a large undertaking initially, getting the initial tech set up and everything, and not using any of, say, Unreal's terrain tools that are built in. But I'm hoping that it'll pay off massively down the line when looking at things like AI and content creation tools, where dynamic, maybe nav meshes, for example, are quite a big deal. And to kind of start helping with the idea of a terrain editor, at least just for us to use for now, I've started building these brush types, which I've shown already. So we've got the standard single one, and then we've got all sorts of different simple, like under the hood, simple voxel selection functions that basically just do various operations, and eventually these will be plugged into a UI system that will call these based on kind of the parameters that you've got set up in more of a natural editor environment. So you might be able to like scale your selection radius, for example, using the mouse wheel, and then those parameters that are produced as a part of that will be then fed into these functions when making large sweeping changes. Currently, they don't do anything in terms of materials. I have materials as a parameter. So you can see here I've got, for example, the XZ position, and then like a range on this one, and this one's the column range. So you'll basically select where you want it to go and then between what distances it will be. And then you'll be able to use the material and the shape parameter, and shape will be automatically generated by the UI, depending on what selection tools you've got currently highlighted. And all that information will pass to this. So all this function is that I'm building out right now is both a container and a manipulator for voxel information, essentially, and it's not going to have any other information built into that. So right now I've been working my way down this list, and these are the things that I predict we'll need, and I've just been filling them in. So far I've got down to this one. This one's just been done, but I'm not sure if I'm entirely happy with it just because of some of the results I'm getting. So an example of why is, so you see here I've basically got my diameter as 20, but the engine currently doesn't distinguish whether or not that's 20, kind of like 20 blocks, because it's centered around a single block. So there's no way for me currently that I've built for me to kind of center it between blocks. So say if there's an odd number or an even number, sorry, of blocks that I've selected to be built out using one of these brushes. So right now I'll just select a center block and do the radius from there, which isn't quite the behavior that I want in the future. If you're selecting even numbers, you should just be able to have a circle which is that diameter in blocks, but it will be currently one less than that because of the way that the distances are calculated, essentially. So hopefully, I mean, if I do something like changing this to 19. Actually, no, let's make it a little bit more manageable. Let's make it 13 just so I can see it. more, and let's get rid of the plain one because that lags it out. Let's recompile it. I mean, it does take its time, unfortunately, Unreal. That's the only thing that I'm not liking about it so far. But if any of you have any suggestions as well on how to deal with this kind of thing, please let me know. Like anything in terms of Unreal that you spot that might be useful for me will be a big help. Because like I say, I am new to this, and I have experience with other game engines. I've used Unity. I built a very basic one using DirectX, but every editor's different, every workflow is different, and a lot of stuff that will be completely alien to me, to be quite honest, when I first start on this. And there will be a lot of back and forth between, you know, maybe the docs, which I know aren't the best for Unreal, or forums, trying to just kind of work things out and, you know, potentially breaking stuff repeatedly until I find the right solution. So, oh, and also that annoying Steam VR thing, if anyone knows how to fix that, let me know. I've tried already and it won't go away. So just while we're waiting for this to load, in case anyone's wondering, the music that I'm using is through a through like a third-party player. I think it does like royalty-free stuff, or like licensed through their plugin stuff. And they have a YouTube safe option as well, which is nice. And that's called Pretzel Rocks, if anyone's interested. So it isn't like my music, but I figure it's nice to have something on in the background while I'm doing this stuff. And if anybody has any suggestions for alternatives, or has any suggestions for the channel in general, just anything to do with content or the way I'm putting it together, then, you know, either put it in like the comment section, or if you're on Twitch, put it on in the Twitch chat. This is kind of like a first time for me doing anything like this, so I'm hoping that while this first set of things that I'm doing will probably be a little bit rough around the edges, it will probably be a little bit janky at times, maybe the audio might not be quite right or whatever. I'm hoping that over time those problems kind of get worked out a little bit, and you know, hopefully the quality improves. That's my kind of goal at the moment, to get my quality up, even just the basic, to like a kind of basic level. I'm not looking to do anything crazy. I don't want mad transitions or special effects or anything like that. And I'm also reluctant to do a camera right now, but hopefully over time those kinds of things will be less of an issue, and people will be more interested in the content just because it's slightly higher quality as well. So now this is done, let's test it, see what it looks like. And so you see that it looks kind of chunky. I mean, I'm sure that is accurate, but yeah, something about it just doesn't look quite right. Let's count how many blocks there are. So we've got 1, 2, 3. That's 11 currently. Yeah, I thought I'd just double check that. So let's quickly have a look at the code again. And I put 13, so obviously something's not quite right there. Ah, right, so it might have been a rounding error, judging by this. What I guess I could always do is for one of these parameters I could add 1, but then I might have some adverse effects in other places, so... Yeah, and by the way, when I'm doing these programming sessions, there will be times where I go very quiet, and the only reason I'm talking a lot right now is because it's the first thing, but while I'm getting used to kind of talking and programming at the same time, I probably will just go dead quiet while I'm trying to work something out, and if that's a problem, I'll try and work on it, but how it goes. Okay, so the way this currently works is I'm taking in essentially the radius. I believe it's getting converted to an int, so what I'll do is I'll take in the diameter itself as a float and I'll recalculate it. And then I can't remember the name of the rounding function, I'll just Google it. Pretty sure there is one. Right, so it's in the include math.h. Put that in there. And just to show you what I'm using the website c++.com. I always kind of stumble into, even though I never seek it out. Quite a useful resource, I guess, for various libraries and that kind of thing. So now I think what we do is just call seal like that. So that'll round up if I've got any issues, and then I can use diameter f there. Same thing goes for this parameter on the other axis as well, just so I'm getting it in both directions. Right. So one thing that I noticed about Unreal is the error messages tend to break all the time, and sometimes I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or not, so a lot of the time I have to kind of just wing it and compile it and see if, you know, things like the header file, for example, are broken. Pretty sure it should be fine. Sometimes can be a bit funny about putting headers in the right place. I think it has to be, if I remember right, it has to be before the included generated header, just so that it has all of its definitions already instated before it pulls all of the engine references, I think. Not entirely sure. So again, you know, there'll be a lot of waiting when it comes to Unreal. I'm hoping that as more of a following kind of grows with this, it might not do, but hopefully it will, even if it's just a few people. In the downtime where I'm doing stuff like this, I can answer questions or do fun kind of like mini games with the chat. I know some channels do certain things, like certain interactive games and stuff like that, but we'll see. Again, like everything here is kind of let's wait and see how it goes, just because it's so new and it might end up being not worth my time in the end, but I hope it is, because Twitch is something I've always wanted to look at. Not necessarily for gaming, so I think gaming's overdone, but just something interesting, something unique. Something unique to me as well. Like, I do play games, but I wouldn't want to stream them necessarily. I feel like that would take a lot of the fun out of it. Right, so let's count it again. So we're getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, 11 again. So obviously something's not quite right with the way I'm doing this. Ooh, not what I wanted. Go away. Let's bring the code back in. So currently we're taking half of the diameter, which in this case should be I think it was 13, wasn't it? So yeah, so we've got 13. 13 divided by 2, rounded up, is 7. So it should be going... We're taking the X center, which is... No, it could be something like... I don't know, let's say 7 for convenience sake, and then we're taking off 7 from that. It's going to be 0. And then we're going up to X center plus 7, so 14. So I would have thought we should actually be doing more than that, unless maybe that is correct. Actually, maybe it's down here. So one thing I've not done is replace these with the sealed version. So just double check I've not missed it anywhere else. Compile it again. It was a bit quicker that time. Right, there we go. Is this any different? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No. Same problem. So we're taking it from the center point. Maybe that's the issue. Maybe it just needs tiny increment just to kind of push it over that. Eventually, maybe of 0.5 to get a nice kind of rounded circle. I presume it's falling just outside of the bounds. That's why it's not working. So maybe if I do less than or equal to, well that for one might work in and of itself, but then I'll only probably get one block on the outer edge, which isn't quite what I want. I'll test it anyway though, just to see what it does, just to make sure it's working basically. And if it's not, I'll add a little bit to it. Just expand that circle a little bit and get a nice kind of rounded amount. No. Okay. So to this, I'm going to add 0.9 This could be 0.5. Don't know how though it's going to be handled in this bit, but it could be fun. In fact, rather than doing it up here, just so I'm avoiding any errors with my for loops, I'll add it to this section. Like that. Give that a go. So one thing as well that I'm not really sure how to handle just yet is I have multiple monitors that are quite useful for developing, and I think the best way to handle that is just to kind of do it how I am currently and just have stuff on one side and then drag it in every now and then. Right, so that's obviously not correct. Looks a lot nicer though. It actually looks like a circle, which is good. Let's just count how many we've got here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not doing them on one side, that's the issue. Oh, of course. So again, same kind of problem. We just need to put less than or equal to, so it's actually hitting the kind of maximum outer square that it needs to. Yeah, that should have fixed the problem now. That should be a simple fix, and if it's not, then yeah. Try it again. Right, so yeah, that's looking a lot better. The one edge case I do want to test is doing the same thing, but with an even number, just to make sure that it kind of behaves acceptably. Doesn't have to be perfect just yet, but so long as it works kind of okay, then I'm happy. Now, just because this is more of the prototyping step for me, I'm not looking to build out the entire engine perfect first try. I know that some of the tools, for example, will probably change over time, will evolve as well, and I will be looking to get a lot of feedback from the other Josh. So Josh is basically the person who I'm doing, who I'm setting up the business with this year, and he's the designer out of the two. I'm the programmer, and once my tool set is kind of online and going, he'll then hopefully be able to take that and test it and use it and give me direct kind of feedback before then pushing it to a wider audience. So I'm hoping, if this works, which, you know, we're putting a lot of risk into this because we're taking an entire year to do it, so if this works, we get, you know, maybe a small user base, a small following. Hopefully some of those people are interested in it enough to support us a little bit along the way, and I will then get further feedback from just kind of general users that isn't kind of through rose-coloured glasses, as they say. So obviously when we're testing it will be tempting for us to be like, oh yeah, it's fine, it works really well, and kind of brush it off a little bit if something's maybe not perfect, but then if something then is seen by a kind of unbiased user base and they say, look, this is important, it might not seem like a big deal, but when you're using this tool every day for content creation, then it's important, then it'll be something that will be revisited and hopefully fixed. So this is doing a test with I think it's a 13 and a 12, so I don't think there's actually any change there. So that's not quite right. But just to make it easier to compare, I'll bring this in again quick. To make it easier to compare, I'll set them both to 20 and just set the height lower. So there we go, it should be easier to see now. Right, so I think the issue is that because we're rounding up, although saying that, it should be just skip this off. Right, so saying that, it should be fine. What I'll do instead might lead to better results. Is I'll plus the 0.5 here, so it just kind of pushes it over that threshold depending on what boundary it's in, but it doesn't affect other results in terms of when it comes to odd and even numbers. I mean, again, it's something I'm planning on revisiting anyway. However, I at least want to get it somewhat close before, you know, saying this is done for now and moving on, because then I'll definitely have to come back. That's the thing. If I know I can maybe get away with something, I might leave it. Just because I don't know what's going to be that important yet. So again, no, exact same issue. They're being treated almost like they're the same number, so I need to work out why. So, do some quick mental math. That's always a good way to go. So if we take the diameter 13, let's say we add 0.5 and then divide it by 2. It's gonna give us I think the same answer as before. I think 7. If we do it again now, you see, I know why. I don't think I want it sealed, I think I want it rounded. So I think the reference is just round, I'm pretty sure. So if I did that, should be fine. I might have to reintroduce the variable here. On the off chance I don't, I'm going to leave that for now, test it again. Since it's only relatively small changes, so like compile times aren't that bad. If I was doing something bigger, I'd think it through a little bit more. But since it's one of those problems where I kind of fix it once, it doesn't take that long to do, and then I move on, I think I can afford to just kind of test it a little bit like this. So that's kind of what I was expecting to some extent. I think I'm still maybe going to add that 0.5 overhead just to make it look a bit nicer. But essentially that's kind of what I want. Obviously they're not supposed to be the same, and that's something I'll fix, but But yeah, right, let's look at the code again. So we've got, let's see, we've got a diameter of 12, divided by 2 is 6, round that it's 6, right? There's nothing different about that. We're taking the center point, which could be 7. Taking away 6, do 1, then we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I kind of see the issue now. But again, saying that, if I did diameter of, if I did 6.5 rounded, that should give me 7, and so the numbers should be different regardless. See why it would do what it's doing for 6, like that makes sense, but I would have expected a bigger area for other stuff. Out of curiosity, what I'll do, just in case this makes any difference at all, I'll put the original diameter in the search radius. And I think actually with it not being rounded that will make a difference. I'm curious to see what difference that will make. I'm hoping it's just a slight visual difference. So whereas before we were just kind of getting one block on the outer edge, I'm hoping for the slightly wider one we'll get a few more. No, right, okay, that's obviously not good. Let me just count quick. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on each side, not including the middle. I suppose another test would be doing same thing but with 11 as well. So breaking these out a bit lower, say 10 just to be consistent. Just to see if it's not a problem with the way that I'm handling it completely. At least if I know there's a step down between 13 and 11, at least then I know it's just a rounding issue and I need to find that sweet spot. So yeah, this is kind of what I was expecting to some extent. What I kind of want to do though is I think I'll probably reintroduce that plus 0.5 so that rather than just doing one block, the curves are slightly more exaggerated. So I'm hoping that might make a slight difference in terms of radiuses. If it doesn't, fair enough. I won't push it too much, but you know. So this is kind of accurate with what I'd expect. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the other side plus 1, which is 11. So that's fine. This one's fine as well, like it makes sense. It's just this center one which I kind of want to be a sweet spot between the two. So let's revisit the code again. So it's always stuff like this that seems like it should be quite a simple problem, but when you start getting into like float rounding and stuff like that, I mean, even simple issues where it's kind of more of a designer choice, you get into these weird dilemmas with small code snippets where you're not always entirely sure how to handle it. Okay, I have an idea. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to remove this again, so it seems like a bit of a waste to have done that, but at least I learned something from it. I'm going to again replace this stuff with the... Oh, actually it should be this, shouldn't it? That would have that would have caused a whole other set of issues. So reintroduce that, but if I can't remember how to do this, I believe it's if mod so essentially if oh, what is it? No, it's mod 2, I believe. Yeah, not just mod. That wouldn't make any sense, right? Where's the... So if mod 2 equals 0, so if divided by 2, the remainder is 0, then we know it's an even number, right? And if it's an even number, we want to change where the x and y center are. So x center... x center plus equals 0.5, so we'll do everything as a positive offset just to not confuse things, and I'll put brackets here just so I can do multiple things at once. So then we've got y center. And yeah, Nailoff. C++ is kind of confusing, but it's like you can't go back once you've done it already, if that makes sense. It's like you kind of learn how to run, and then it's uncomfortable to go back to walking, if that kind of makes sense as an analogy. Like going from C++ to C#, for example, is not a nice transition. At least it wasn't for me. Just because you kind of encounter loads of dilemmas where you know you can do something a certain way in the other language, but that power is kind of stripped away in favour of other benefits. Especially with like C# garbage collection as an example. Like you have to be very careful in C++ when doing any memory management or variable creation. But with C#, it's all handled for you. You don't need to care. Like, you do a little bit just so that you're not filling up your RAM with junk, but for the most part, it'll handle certain situations, I guess. So again, so if we get the remainder of diameter divided by 2, if it's an even number, we want to change the offset a little bit so that it's in the center of 4 cubes. And then we need to... You know what, actually that might be fine in and of itself. That might be okay. Because all we're doing there really is changing where the center point is and then hoping it adds a bit extra to it. Yeah, let's give that a go. Why not? No harm in trying, I suppose. Right, so that's compiled. Let's play again. See if we get anything different. No. No is the answer to that question. That is weird. Alright, so this is where I really need to put on my thinking cap and work out what the hell it is I've actually done, just in case I've done something kind of completely wrong. Okay, alright, so for the... I'm actually going about this the wrong way. I'm using for loops, which obviously are int, so they'll be rounded to whatever the nearest is anyway, so I can't use these increments. What I can do, however, is change my upper range. So, yes, I'll need this for the calculation later on, but yeah, so I'll basically need to change the fact that I'm adding an additional 1 onto this final variable. And I also want these to be converted to floats as well, so that it actually preserves the 0.5 part of it, because right now it won't, it will just kind of get rid of it. So instead I need to declare some new variables. I'll call it fx center just to kind of be... It'd be nice if I could type properly today. Make that, actually, yeah, make that undeclared. Sorry, not undeclared. In fact, so there's a different way I can do this. So I'll do if this condition, and we can use what's called the ternary operator, I think, and say if this precondition is true, return this value, and if not, I believe that's the key for it, we just return x center to this point. So everything after the equal sign here, because we're using this little operator, is evaluated. So this condition is evaluated, and then it will return to this equals either one of these results. So basically, I need to do the same thing for both. So copy that, change that to that, get rid of that so we no longer need it anymore. Change that to y center. There we go. And then I need to replace any instance of well, it's basically just the upper bound in the for loops. So yeah, if I do f center there, same with that, y center there. And then do essentially replace these variables here so that we're getting a different kind of, we're using a different center point and we're still preserving that offset. Come on. There we go. There. So now what this function's doing is it's taking one input, which could be an int, well, it has to be an int, so that we're not getting any kind of weird radiuses or anything plugging into this variable. And then we're seeing whether or not it's even or odd. If it's odd, obviously we need to offset the center point of the radius so that we're not centered around a single cube, which wouldn't give us an even amount of blocks essentially in a circle. And then once we've determined whether or not that's the case, we'll we'll change the offset and then also change however much we're incrementing by as well. And I'm hoping that this will kind of round up when doing this evaluation. If it doesn't, we'll just revisit that, see how it goes. So again, let's go back, let's compile it, see how that all works. Didn't take long. Do another playthrough. This is a moment of truth. So, no, we've had absolutely zero change. It's really odd, actually. I would have thought that it would at least do something. Unless I'm doing something wrong, like maybe it's not recompiled something, or my thinking isn't quite right here. That's strange. Hang on. I didn't do the Y. I could have sworn I did it before, but oh well. I'm trying to juggle a lot in your head at once, like sometimes you just miss obvious stuff. At least I do anyway. Right, let's try it again. So, again, no obvious change, which is annoying, but we can deal with it. So, let's run through it. Yeah, we're changing the offset to be the center of some things. Maybe what we should do as well is get a min and max range as kind of pre-compiled variables, just so that it's a bit clearer what's actually going on. So to do that, we will declare some floats. One second, actually, I'm going to see if I can turn vocals off of the music, but I think I can. There we go. Right, so where are we? So I need to pre-calculate my x min and y min and x max and y max before doing any of the actual block placement. Because if I manage to do that, then it'll be a lot easier to kind of understand what's actually happening here. So the first one's relatively simple. Because we're only changing the upper, like when it's even number, since we're only changing the upper range, we actually don't need to modify the x min. It should just be as simple as doing this, essentially. So I'm going to copy that. So we're just taking the x center. We're minusing diameter divided by 2. And that should be fine. But then for the x max, it gets a little bit more complicated because we need to do something again similar to this. So if this is the case, we want to return... What do we want to return? We want to return this amount. In fact, no, it can just be, yeah, it can just be the x center variable. Same thing as this, but we're adding instead. So, but then we want to add an additional 1 to this, just to increase that range by 1. And then we also need an alternative as well, where if that is just odd, we just do the standard diameter divided by 2. That's looking about right. I'd say that's probably correct right there. And it removes some of the kind of ambiguity as well as to what's actually going on in the for loop, because we're doing it up front. So if I miss anything, like, just let me know. If you see anything in the code where maybe I've accidentally put a Y or an X, like, just let me know. It helps a lot as well, like, especially when you don't have a fresh set of eyes. Sometimes you'll be working on code for hours. You'll make certain assumptions and then you don't actually make any progress because you don't realise you're doing something quite wrong or something like that. Yeah, I think that's... I'm pretty sure that's right. That looks about right to me. So instead of doing all this complicated stuff in here, we've changed essentially where we're putting it. Oh, don't want to cut it, I want to copy. And that actually makes it a lot easier to read. And a lot easier to modify as well, that's the important thing. Because once the compiler's done its job, it doesn't necessarily matter if a piece of code is complex in the sense that there's a lot of separate things going on, because a lot of that will be optimized out. The only time your compiler won't deal with this kind of thing well is when you're doing a lot of expensive calculations that are different for every iteration. So if, say, the calculation itself changed for these variables every time we loop through, that's when the compiler would maybe have a bit of an issue. But of course that only really matters for large bits of code. This is only a single use placement bit of code, so ultimately it's not that important. So let me just double check everything just to see if there's any differences in the code that I need to be aware of. So obviously the center point now is actually changed. We're actually relying on a different center point, so I just need to double check that these are actually all correct. By looking at it, it seems to be the case. So again, let's put the code to one side, we'll compile it, test it, and see if we get anything different. If not, then I don't know what's happening, but all we can do is carry on simplifying and putting stuff in separate variables and just eliminating certain factors. Okay, well that's obviously not worked. Which one is this? This is... Ah. Well, that's weird. What have I done wrong? I've obviously done something wrong. It's just working out what. So, right. Let's just double check my for loop, make sure I'm not doing anything silly there. So, the initial thing is xmin, is the x center minus the diameter. That makes sense. Then my x max is the x center plus that diameter calculation plus an additional 1. Again, that kind of makes sense, unless it's not satisfying this condition, in which case... Ah, I see what's going on. Yeah, I knew it was something silly. Right. Just needed to actually replicate the whole equation in the second half, and not just not just the diameter divided by 2, which isn't helpful in the slightest. So again, we'll test that, we'll run it, and see what kind of results we get. At least I can see if I fix the problem that I just created anyway. Right, so these are back. That's a start at least. At least we've got something working. So maybe my thinking about this isn't quite right. Maybe there's something that I'm kind of missing. I still think it's in the equations themselves. Like, I'm pretty sure something to do with this stuff. So to simplify things even more, I'm going to stick something else outside, which is radius, which is diameter divided by 2. This will clean up some of... not that one. Some of the slightly messier parts of the equations that I'm using here. And it also helps that we're using floats as well, like just to kind of force the compiler to say, look, we want this to be a decimal, we don't want it to be rounded to the nearest number, just in case that has any kind of side effects. Sometimes it does. And I can do the same down here as well now. So radius, radius. I could take this a step further and do all the squaring, but I'm not going to, just because it isn't necessary. And to be honest, it doesn't save me much space on the screen in terms of this equation, because that's ultimately all that's using it, really. Okay. I'm sure I've done something silly, or maybe like I'm just not quite thinking about something in the right way. So this part I'm pretty sure is fine. Like, that should be okay. But what I'm going to do, just in case I've missed something, is I'm going to look up the ternary operator for C++, just in case I've got my return section, so here and here, just in case I've got them the wrong way around. That might be an issue. Yeah, so what I thought, so this side is if true, so if this is true, and that side is if it's false. And I'm pretty sure I'm using this correctly as well. So we divide diameter by 2, and we get the remainder of that. We find out what that is. So maybe it helps to wrap it in brackets. Probably not, but it's worth a try. Same down here as well, actually. So it's alright. Let's go through step by step again, just to make sure that we've got everything kind of working how I'm expecting it to, and I can do some quick mental math and just see if there's anything that jumps out. So we want to take this diameter, and then we say, okay, the radius is the diameter divided by 2. That makes sense. And then we're saying if it's an even number, we want to set the offset slightly, just so that it's in between cubes rather than it being the centre of a single cube, so that our range is around that centre point instead for the equation later on. So that seems fine. This bit seems okay, so that's okay. That's okay. So it's just this bit now that I need to look at. So my x-min is always going to be the centre minus the radius. Yeah, and that should be true no matter what. We shouldn't need to use this one because ultimately it won't change, especially if we want the lower bound to stay in the same place. So if we're, say, dealing with 10 or 11, the starting bound for 10 and 11, like the starting block position and the x and y, is always going to be this equation. It's always going to be the starting cube minus half of the diameter, so the radius. So that range seems to make sense, that's fine. But then in the case of the max, we want to know if it's an even one, we're adding well, yeah, if it's even, we're adding 1 in addition to x centre plus the radius. If it's false, we're just leaving it as is. That's definitely addition. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that this is okay as well. Like, that seems fine to me. Nothing really stands out, and to be honest, it seems alright. I can't see anything wrong with that. The only thing I can think to do is again adding 0.5 to this section, just to make it so that the radius that we're checking against is it's just that little bit larger. It might highlight some differences for us that maybe I didn't see before. Like, maybe it is kind of behaving how it's supposed to, but the differences aren't noticeable enough to even see if that's the case. So, okay, let's try that. So, minimize that again, recompile. Another issue to note as well that I've noticed with the Unreal compiler is sometimes if you make small changes, like number changes, it doesn't always pick them up, so you have to do a complete rebuild, and that can often take a while. Okay, so nothing has changed. Behaving exactly how it did before, which obviously isn't quite how it's supposed to work. That's really strange. So, one thing I'll check, so I'll bring the code back up, is I just want to double check that this line here is behaving how I expect it to. So if I go to, well, I'll just do a quick Google search for checking even numbers C++. I mean, it's a relatively simple thing, but sometimes you just get stuff wrong. Yeah, so that's behaving how I expect it to as well. That is really weird. Really weird. Maybe there's just something I'm missing. Maybe I'm not quite seeing something. So in this case, what we're doing with this equation, this might be the culprit here. So yeah, we're taking the adjusted x center, which should have that 0.5 offset adjusted to it. So if I don't know if you can press, if you can just do float after like that. I don't think you can. No. Just worried that maybe this is rounding incorrectly. If this squared, which I think is fine, plus this result squared, which I think is fine, is less than or equal to radius squared. See, this is the frustrating thing. Everything seems correct here. Like, I can't see anything inherently wrong. Might just be one of those things that I leave for now, just so I'm not getting too stuck on it, and I'll revisit it at a later date. And obviously it's not fun for you guys to watch me as well, just dealing with one problem all the time. I don't know, we'll do one more compile. In fact, instead of just doing a compile, so I'll show you what I mean by it not quite picking up changes sometimes. So if it's not detecting a change that you've made, oh, didn't mean to click that. So obviously save your project, and then once you're done doing that, go to build, and then rebuild solution. Now this may take a while, especially if you're doing other things like I am, like streaming, but once it's rebuilt, it'll essentially have kind of done like a clean build of your entire solution, so it will rescan every line, even if your IntelliSense hasn't picked up any changes that you've made. So sometimes it doesn't pick up changes, and that's what I mean. So doing a rebuild like this is kind of like a complete refresh. How long have I been programming with C++? So C++ is something I've only really used for just over a year now, but not for that full year necessarily. So I actually haven't done any full-scale projects in C++. I've done some smaller things because I go to uni currently, or at least I'm in my placement year right now, just started. So So for about a year to 2 years, we've kind of been doing a C++ learning module, which has taught us kind of all of the foundations that you need to be an effective C++ programmer. And I'd say that module in and of itself is good, but it doesn't teach you how to tackle these sometimes more complex logic problems, especially when floats are involved sometimes. Like, you kind of just have to pick it up as you go. So I'd say I'm good with C++, just sometimes I can make silly mistakes, especially when it comes to maths formulas and that kind of thing. Just because I'm not actually that familiar with maths as a whole. I didn't do it at A level. Kind of wish I had, but for various reasons it didn't end up happening. I ended up doing IT courses instead, on top of the computing course that I did there. So oftentimes, like, I can get the base programming stuff done. Like, if you ask me to do any architectural stuff, I'll be great with it. But when it comes to some more complex maths equations, I have to do a lot of research for those and make sure I understand it as well. Like, it's quite important that I understand a concept and not just, oh yeah, I'm just going to copy and paste this thing off of Stack Overflow, which I know a lot of programmers do, and it drives me mad because you ask them what it's supposed to be doing, or can they make changes to it, and they don't have a clue. Yeah, this hasn't changed at all. I just do want to double check though that the sizes are still correct and I've not broken that. So top one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up to the halfway point, so 13. So yeah, that's 13. Now middle one should be slightly changed, but it isn't, so that's odd. I'm pretty sure it is just that equation that's not working properly. I'll bring it up again. The one where it's determining like where it's determining where to go up to, because as far as I can tell it should be fine. There shouldn't be any issues with this. And I have input the offset one as well, the one with the addition of the 0.5. Out of curiosity, actually, I'm just going to change that to 1. It might not make any difference, and it's not actually the thing that I want it to be, but, you know, at least then I can see that this is doing something, and I know that if I don't... If I was to leave that as it was, it'd probably drive me mad. So, we'll try this. We'll try again. One last time. It's always simple stuff like this that's the most frustrating, where you think you know how it works, but obviously it doesn't do what you think it should. So, I mean, it's done something. I don't know if it's exactly what I want it to do, but I mean, I guess. But I'm not sure that's right. Like, logically, I don't think that's quite how it's supposed to work. I mean, hey, I guess if it works, it works, but still, it's not quite right, which is frustrating. So I'm sure if I was to do this with larger circles, I'd start seeing issues. Oh, and in fact, it's not correct, yeah, because all I've done is offset it completely. Which obviously isn't the result that is wanted here. Like, it needs to line up with... Like, it needs to be extended, but also it needs to have this little thing here as well. So that is too much, actually. That is too much of an offset. At least I know that it's actually doing something, though. That's a start. It's something where I can say, yeah, it's not quite doing what I think it should, but at least I know that I'm on the right track, and it is just like probably a math error, and it's not something that I've done wrong. So how can I fix this? That's the question I need to work out right now. So I'm certain it's to do with rounding errors. So what I'm going to do is add an additional 0.1 to that and just see if it stretches the boundary ever so slightly just to be large enough to add that additional layer that I need around one side. And actually thinking about it, am I even doing this right at all? Maybe rather than adding 1 to the radius, maybe I should be adding 0.5. Maybe that's the problem. In fact, I'm pretty sure that is the issue, because obviously I don't want to make the circle itself any bigger, I just want to change where it's affecting, almost. I'm getting there, I'm nearly there, I know I am. Sometimes you can feel it, and I feel it right now, so I think I'm close, I'm close. Right. This should be 1 smaller. Is it 1 smaller? Not quite. Yeah, this middle one here should kind of be a halfway between the two, but it's identical to the top. Maybe instead then, maybe I don't add any circular offset. Maybe it just stays as it was. Like I don't really want to be expanding the circle as such, so let's try just getting rid of that for now. I know that there's duplicate code, but I'll remove that if it worked. Compile this again. Press play. Has it done anything different? Nope. That's just weird. I can't for the life of me figure this out, to be quite honest. Top one's fine, bottom one's fine. So just double check I'm actually building the right circle sizes as well. See, I'm doing 11, 12, 13. Should be cool. Should decrease the radius as well. Or rather, not decrease the radius, but shift the origin center. So it should be building a different set of blocks each time. Since that has no effect, I'll just see if the circles are still the right size, and then I'll remove that duplicate code. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that should be 13, yeah, that's fine. So go back to this, get rid of this entire expression. For both. So it's a really bizarre problem to deal with, because it's not necessarily straightforward. just because I'm using a mixture of integers and floats. Like, I'm pretty sure this is correct. Like, this bit should be fine. So that should do my offset, which is what I want. Oh, of course. Yeah, no, I'm being really stupid with that. It should be plus equals. I bet you that fixes the problem as well. I almost guarantee that fixes the problem. Of course it does. Of course it fixes the problem. Oh. Right, so this is what I mean. Sometimes you can spend literally ages debugging something, and you start questioning everything, and you, for the life of you, can't figure it out. But your one change seems relatively minor, and it fixes everything for you. So, thankfully now I've actually fixed the problem. I feel like such a moron. Ugh. That's annoying. Also means I can put this back into the loops as well, because there's no point at all in me overcomplicating it with different variable declarations if it's relatively minor. So add this back in. There, add that back in to here. Get rid of all of this. Get rid of my little annotations. Where am I using radius? I'll leave that because it's quite useful. That I'll leave how it is because that's what I need for checking odds and evens, so that's fine. Right, so yeah, I think I'm done with my my circular code after all of that time. It took me bloody ages, but here we are. So now what I can do, and I do apologise, this is going to be relatively boring, but for the next few I'm going to copy and paste for my next function declarations, and then just change a few variable names so that it's on the right axis and everything like that. So if we go to create definition, that'll build us a new one down here and highlight it, identical to the thing that we've declared in the header, so that I'm not having to write out everything by hand, which is useful. Want to copy and paste all of this. So right, now we need to decide basically what actually needs changing. So we're trying to tackle now the XZ plane. So rather than the circle being flat, we're now essentially making it vertical, I believe, on this one. So we need to change everything that was once Y up here to a Z. So for example, FZ center, again Z center, and so on. And I'll basically be doing this process for this one and the one afterwards. And most importantly, we're doing the Z here instead. And what this will do, it might seem like I'm not actually changing anything, but it's relevant when it comes to, well, reading the code for one. Like, you need to know what variables you're actually targeting, but also this section here. So this is where all the kind of magic actually happens when it comes to spawning stuff in. So this will get changed to the Z because we have the Z now in the loop, so we know what parameter we're changing, and this needs to get changed to Y center, so that we're always keeping our blocks centered on the Y axis based on the parameter that's passed in here. So when someone's using this function, they'll define whereabouts the center of their circle is going to be, and when we're spawning it in, we're making sure that the Y axis is always unchanged for every single one. So yeah, let me go back to just filling in the rest of these, just so that it's a bit more readable, and also the parameters make sense as well, because if someone uses the parameters and they don't actually line up with what they should, then it's going to cause issues. X and Z, Z. Oh yeah, and Z here as well, and Z here. I believe that's everything. I'll just do a quick visual double check just in case I've missed anything. So every instance of Y that I had before has changed to Z. Same here. And same down here. Yeah, that's all looking good. And then obviously I've swapped the behavior of these two around. So instead of doing the Z center to orient it on the Z axis, we're doing the Y center. And yeah, and I now need to repeat the process for the next one. So copy that down again. I can paste that in. And rather than just changing the one set of variable names, we're changing two, which is going to be slightly confusing. Well, it's not strictly true. We can recycle some stuff. So this is going to change to Z instead. So yeah, instead we're going to be taking this and putting it as a replacement here. Changing this to Z's. And then obviously we want to increment the Z as well. Z. F Z. Oh whoops, no, I was changing the wrong one there. Not that one I'm changing anymore, it's the X. And then the Y is the thing that remains the same in this case. Right, so just to double check that I've done everything properly, we have the Y parameter. That's pulling from the Y parameters up here. And we've got the Z center, again pulling from the Z parameters, that seems fine. Got all our Y increments, they're all labeled correctly. All our Z increments, they're labeled correctly. That one's not correct, that needs to be Z as well. Z, 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 and then that should be Y, Y, etc. That's fine. And now we want to change that for Z because we've got the Y and Z parameter. We want to put X center at the start, and that should be everything. So now I can actually test these, and I can test them relatively simply actually, just by doing that, and I want Y, Z as well. So this, just to quickly explain all this stuff, this is just my onPlay function if you've used Unity before. It's just basically when the scene starts, it calls all of this stuff, and I've just got some test calls of the existing functions I've already built just so I can see them on screen, just with some basic parameters in. The material parameters and the shape parameters don't actually do anything currently, but they're something that are important later on for I mean, I explained this earlier in the stream, but if you weren't here, like for adding different types of blocks. So when using a terrain tool, for example, which is something that I want to do for like a level editor, we've got different shape customization. So we can make, you know, like hills or whatever the case may be, like kind of Age of Empires style terrain where it's not entirely flat and it's not like Minecraft either. It's kind of a nice blend of the two. So let's get rid of these objects again. So do a quick recompile just to make sure everything's actually built properly. let's see. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of working. Like, obviously the brushes are going to look squished because everything's half slabs, but at least now I know that, yeah, it works. Seems to preserve the right scaling and everything, so that's great. Works on different axes now. Essentially what I did is I just took the same parameter, same function calls I was using before and just called the new function type. Yeah, that's great, to be honest. The fact that that works, like, I'm quite pleased, because now I know that my code hasn't got any like weird spelling errors or anything in where I've forgotten to change over like an X, for example. Oh, right, now that's working. Quite happy I got that working, actually. That's quite nice. After all of that, we're stuck on one simple simple problem for the last however long. Okay, so what next? So the next big step, so we're not just doing a copy and paste job anymore. I mean, we kind of are, but not quite, is to build out the ellipse functions. So these will behave relatively similar. I mean, if you've watched up to this point, not a lot is going to change, but it will matter when it comes to the equation itself for working out whether or not a circular block is within the right radius. So we create definition for this. So to do a quick explanation of what I mean, take this, in fact no, we'll take the same XY code. So no longer do we have just one parameter, now we have two. So we're going to have to take X radius, Y radius, and essentially change all of these equations such that they make sense with this kind of dual parameter setup. The biggest change is going to happen down here. Essentially the equation that I use to work out whether or not a block within this square of this for loop lies within the radius that I'm trying to target for the ellipse itself. That will have to change, because we're no longer just seeing if we're kind of a fixed distance away from the center, if that makes sense. We're now seeing if it's a distance from the center relative to the X and Y dimensions, which will be slightly different. So I'll basically just do the basic parameter setup for now. So this is relatively simple. We're just doing what we were before, just doing some variable name changes, basically. Same with this as well. Oh, not Dadius, X Dadius. We're doing Y again, not Y Dadius, Y radius there. Same for this thing as well. Right, so this is the meat of it. This entire equation, as far as I know, changes. It becomes completely different. What I'm going to do is do some quick Google searching, see if I can find something relatively simple. So I'll do it on the side, and the reason I want to do it on the side is because I'm relatively new to streaming. I don't want to get in any trouble, you know, relating to sharing people's copyrights and everything through video. So I don't want to accidentally show something that is content protected or anything like that, basically. So you'll have to bear with me for a second. But I will try and make it as quick as I can. Oh, thanks for the follow, dude. That's awesome. You're my first genuine follow. Like, that actually means a lot to me. Thanks, dude. Like, I have another follower, but it's like my friend, so I don't think that really counts. And he doesn't actually watch my streams either. He just kind of wants to know what I'm doing, which is fair enough. Right, so essentially what this is saying to do is it's actually saying use a similar algorithm to the one that I've already got. But the whole thing changes ever so slightly. So right, so this is what I mean or meant earlier about like not just copying and pasting off of Stack Overflow if you don't understand what something does. Like, I'm going to show you why. So I'll copy this in, and this is a relatively simple example. Like, most people would be able to figure out what parameters to put where. But let's say you were copying a more complex piece of code and there were more complex variables involved, or maybe some variable names that didn't more cleanly line up with the ones that you already had. You would run into a lot of issues when it comes to working out what to put where. So this is relatively simple for me. Now I believe height refers to just my... I don't actually... You see, this is where I'm getting into a problem. I don't actually know myself what exactly this is asking for, and I'll have to experiment with it. So it actually highlights the issue completely. I don't know if this wants full heights, or if it wants radius heights, or if it wants... Maybe this person was referring to the actual width. Maybe they weren't using traditional XY coordinates. So this will be an interesting example to use. For now, though, I'm going to use my diameters because they are the full heights of the circle. I'm going to plug those in. Same with here. And the... What was it? No, the X diameter is what I wanted. So for the width, it's going to be the X diameter. So this is looking like a bit of a nasty equation, and if you didn't actually understand what it was you were copying, which I fully don't now because I don't know what it's asking for as a maths equation, you would probably get it wrong. So to test this out, I'm going to quickly make another function call. So in my test code up here, I'll put in... Where am I going to put this? I'll put this probably somewhere a bit out the way. So I'll do 5, 15. Put it at a height of 10, so it's on the same level as my other one. I'll try 8, and I don't know, let's try 13, why not? Let's give that a go. And then obviously just put the default parameters in that I don't need currently for my material and my shape. So put this random call. That'll test my function. If it doesn't work at all, then I know that either I'm not calling it properly, which I'm almost certain I am, or I've done something wrong in the importing of my calculation. Because the actual setting up of the variables was relatively simple. There was nothing really that could go wrong there. That's supposed to be it? Maybe that's it? Maybe I've cut it off by accident. Let me check. Let's bring that back in. Right, so let's put this, instead of being there, I'll put it at 10 and yeah, I'll put it at 10:10, just so it's, you know, center and doesn't get cut off like I just have done. 8:13, that should be fine, and then I just want to double check I've not used the wrong thing. Yeah, so that should be okay. So now we can recompile again. Right, so obviously this isn't working properly, and this is exactly what I mean. I've copied something, I've not fully understood its purpose, and as a result, it's done something really weird. Like, I don't actually get what it's done here, so let's revisit it. So we are taking Right, so I'm going to assume that I'm not supposed to use the diameter and I'm in fact supposed to use the radiuses. That might be the issue. And thanks, by the way, No Laugh. Like, it's really important to me that like I build some kind of a following. Like, not because I want people to just watch me necessarily, but it's nice to be able to do something like this and have people kind of follow along and like give you some company, because programming can be pretty dull, to be quite honest, but it helps a lot being able to explain to a group of people exactly what it is that I'm doing and have them interested as well. That's a big deal. So, right, back to it. So we're putting in the radius instead of the diameter. It's quite easy to find because it's greyed out. Right, so we'll try compiling that now. That's not even done anything. So obviously I'm doing this function completely wrong. Right, I'm going to do some more digging. So I'll have a look at... So I'm going to have a look at the same resource I was using before, but I'll see if I can find a different answer that's maybe worded it slightly differently. Might help. Yeah, so So I think I might have a solution. Maybe. But it involves axes, so I'm going to strip out any code relating to the axis of the object. Oh, thanks, man. Second one, that's great. You guys are like my stars, my star pupils. Not that I'm teaching anything, to be honest. I'm just gonna ramble most of the time and hope that someone finds it entertaining. But you know, the problem with a lot of the resources I'm using right now is they're kind of really mathsy. Like, it's hard to translate some of the axis stuff, which is all to do with matrices and stuff. If any of you know what that is. And translate it into something meaningful in code. Like, I can do it, but it would require a lot of additional effort, and right now I'm not concerned with doing axes for the oval adjustments that I'm trying to do right now. Currently it's just it's literally just putting in an X width and a Y width, and then saying, you know, this is my oval parameters, build an oval to those constraints. So I'm on the right track with what I've done here, but obviously, like say I don't really know how it's working from a math standpoint. And that's the bit that annoys me. I wish I was more capable with like the math side of things so that I could understand more what's going on and then come up with my own solutions to these slightly more complex problems rather than rely on other people's. Okay, so I've come across another equation, and this is one I've seen before actually, and it's relying on the fact that if you add two parts of the equation together, the result will come to less than 1 if it's inside the oval radius, or greater than 1. So I will copy it in its raw form just so you guys can see what I mean. So this is the equation that I'd be using, essentially, if I was to do it this way, which I think is a slightly better solution because I can introduce more parameters into it, like relatively easily, because it's a matter of, like when I come to do my spheres, for example, and my ellipsoids, I will want to add a third dimension. So I'm hoping it's as simple as adding an additional part to the equation and then saying less than or equal to 1.5 instead of just 1. Whether or not that's the case, I don't know, it might not be, but this seems better, I think. Right, so looking into this resource, H and K are the center points. So I guess H is center X and K is center Y. Yeah, so if I replace FX center, sorry, if I replace H with FX center, I think that's the only reference to it, and K with, oops, with FY center. And then A and B are my widths and heights. So I don't know if that wants diameter though. That's the only thing I'm not certain about. I'll test both and see what it is. I'm guessing it just wants diameters, so I'll give that a go. I'll take my. Oops. So put that in there. Take that. Put that in there. This could work. What's this saying? In X must have a. Might be that it doesn't like using this character. What I'll do is go back to my old way of doing it instead. Does that fix it? Does that like it then? Might have to do it for all of them. And then obviously for this one as well, so we want to take that and we want to go times itself. And then finally for this one, again, we want to go, instead of doing that to the power of 2, we want to times it by itself. Right, does that fix the issue? Yes, it does. Right, so I'll just bracket that just so I'm not confused by it. So now if we compile this and run it, hopefully we'll get something a little bit more close to what we want it to be, but unlike the other thing where it didn't work at all. No, again, we're not getting anything. So maybe it's something to do with my for loop then. To be fair, it seems alright. Yeah, this is going to be another one of those problems where I'm completely in the dark. Instead of diameters, I'll try and use the radius and see if that fixes my issues. Right, recompile, let's go. And just so you guys know, like from now on, so long as I'm not busy with something, so tomorrow I'll be busy, for example, I will be trying to do this kind of style of session every day. Oh, look. I can't believe it actually kind of worked. That's awesome. Now I actually need to count it though to make sure it's doing the right thing. So yeah, as I was saying, like I'll be trying to do this every day apart from on weekends because I do want a break away from Twitch. I don't want to burn out. I don't want to you know, be slaving away every day and start kind of getting boring. Like, I don't expect people to be there every day watching me program, because it is kind of a, I guess, an odd, like, daily thing to come back to. Like, I appreciate it's not as easy to watch as other types of content, but hopefully it's engaging enough to be something that you can come back to every now and then. Like, you know, as long as I'm consistent with my days, and if people want it, I'll maybe try and do the weekends instead, but I'll have to see what people are interested in, and you guys can inform that. So if you guys tell me what days are best for you, like, I'll adjust my schedule until I get more people watching, and more people tell me what days are best, and then I'll adjust it that way. Because my schedule is essentially flexible at this point now, because I don't have any kind of strict timetabling obligations or anything like that, so I am easy, which is nice. Right, so let's play it again, just to double check. So we want to be targeting 8 across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, and 13 in the other direction. We've got 5. I think we've got 11 going in the other direction, actually, if I've done my math right. Yeah. Right, so we've got 11. Yeah, we've got 11 going in the other direction, which isn't exactly what we want. So what I'm going to do, work out why. So I reckon it's something to do with the way I'm kind of compressing FX center and FY center, like, because we're doing it as 2 separate equations now. I have the feeling that that might interfere with how it's supposed to work. Or maybe it's something to do with, like, the scaling. Like, maybe the scaling isn't quite what it should be. What I might do actually is I'll test it with a different set of parameters, just to see what result I get, because I'm kind of curious to see how that turns out. So where are we? Here. Right, so we want to do something a bit bigger, so we'll go with doing 10 and no, we'll do 12. Increase its position slightly so it's not butted up against the edge of the world volume, and try something odd this time. Let's try 15, just in case it's like a compression thing. It might just be that because we scaled it kind of small, it might be trimming off the edge block, so I don't want to rule out that it isn't working properly just yet. Oh, don't do that. Just want to maximize again. Recompile it. Okay, so it's obviously a bit bigger this time. Kind of in the way of the other blocks as well. I'll just get rid of those quick, just they're not in the way. I'll again. Hopefully it will be the last time. And we'll play it. So the numbers we're looking for here are... Okay, so this is actually interesting. It's actually scaling in the wrong direction, which isn't something I realised before. Because I believe it should be scaling Actually, before I do that, I'm just going to see what axis that stick was aligned on, just in case it is going in the right way. So I had column in the Y direction. Yeah, so it actually is going the right way. So, okay, that's good. So I had a column in the Y direction. So that's actually my Y axis. I thought it was my X just because facing forward you kind of expect this direction, like left and right, to be your X-axis, but I guess I've done something different, or whatever the case may be, like the way I've set it up. So maybe it's even Unreal. Maybe Unreal's on a different, like, forward axis. Okay, so I needed a horizontal X-axis of, what was it now? 12, I think it was. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 going in that direction. And I needed, was it 17? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 8 plus this amount, which is 13. Yeah, that's obviously not the number I'm looking for. Yeah. Oh, it was actually 15 that I had. So I'm still 2 off on either end, which is slightly confusing actually, but maybe I can work out why. Maybe it's something simple, or maybe it's just like a scaling thing. Tell you what, actually, one test that would be a really good way to work out whether or not I'm doing the ovals properly is to set it to what I'd obviously expect a circle to be, both for odd and even numbers, and see if it represents that correctly against a circle. And then I know if there's anything fundamentally wrong with the equation, or at least it's maybe not quite accurate, because I should be getting the same results. They should kind of be the same thing, right? So if I take this down again and I feed it with same X, same Y, but a different Z, and I give it the same parameters. So in this case it's a radius of, sorry, a diameter of 12. You can see whether or not there's something wrong fundamentally with the scaling of the oval, or rather the ellipse function. So let's try that. So we'll recompile. Let's give it a play. I've obviously not done something right. Let's have a look. What have I done then? Because that was working before. I don't know, have I clipped something out? Maybe I have. Maybe they're in the same place. I mean, they shouldn't be, but put that at 20, I guess, just to see if anything changes, maybe? Maybe I'm an idiot, maybe I've done something completely wrong, who knows? Oh, and now it's visible. That's bizarre. Well, let's compare these anyway, just in case. So they are looking the same to me. They look about right, I'd say. So maybe it's when doing... Let me revert that back. I think it maybe just didn't pick it up on the compiler end. Let me change this to an odd number, because this is another thing I want to test. I want to see if the odd number scaling is maybe slightly wrong for the ovals, because it could very well be. Let's recompile that. Right, so obviously we've got some kind of issue here. So it seems like it's clipping a bit more than it should. And only in one direction as well, which is odd. And by a different width and height? That's really bizarre. Let me just double check I've done my parameters correctly, because that'd be... Oh. Yeah, of course. No, I'm an idiot. File again. I assure you there'll be many moments when I'm doing these live streams where I'm just like, yeah, I'm a dumbass, and I've done something completely wrong, or just like a minor thing which I should have seen or should have changed, and I haven't done. Right, so that's that's looking more like it. That's better. So that is actually working properly. It's only when doing scaling in a specific direction that it seems to change, which is kind of understandable. Like, that's a compromise I'm happy with, because at least then I know it works, and I know that because this is set, this is set to a circular brush type, I know that when adjusting it based on different settings, it will behave in the same way when setting it to a circular radius. And that I'm fine with, because compression will be something that's kind of, I guess, expected to some extent. Like, when compressing it on one axis, you will lose a little bit of that resolution towards the outer edges, and that's fine. So long as the tool is close enough, I think that's a fine compromise. Like, that seems to work. I'm happy with it. I just kind of want to do a couple more tests just to make sure I've not missed anything. So, like, I'll count the diameter. I mean, it should be fine because the circle was fine. But that's 13 across. So again, going back to the 12, I did just want to double check that it was the right diameter on the even numbers, because I didn't actually check it properly. So comparing it against the circle, I guess, is important for doing that. Again, I know that the circle's accurate to some extent. And it's also helpful to see if it's applying the same offset as well. So yeah, that all looks fine. So I've got, got diameter of 12 on both. That's great. And one last test to do is to set it to something like 6 on the x-axis and recompile that. It should only take a few seconds. Because I could assume that it all works and is all fine, but when doing anything like this, it's really important to double check, just in case, like, the algorithm you're using is slightly funky or it's slightly weird. And yeah, that works perfectly. It's 6 across. Same width, I think, as well. I think the only case that you'll get a little bit of trimming on the edges is when you've got an odd number in one direction and an even number in the other. But again, like, that's kind of fine. Like, that's kind of an alright compromise. I can live with that. It's nothing major. It's nothing like breaking or anything. So that's fine by me. So now I can again do the boring work of, like, copying and pasting it across to the new axes, and then I'll do a quick test again to see if that's working. So I will quickly trim out the circle because I no longer need it. I'll automatically make, I don't know why that's being annoying. Right there, I'll automatically make new definitions and start the process of copying this over. So you can see quite easily, and I mean you did see, to some extent, that if I hadn't known how this equation had worked, even just a little bit, you can quickly get into hot water with trying to get it to work properly or making adjustments to it. So it's important that when you're doing any mathsy stuff or anything that's a bit weird in terms of logic, that you at least understand the fundamentals of how it works, and that your understanding of the variables used lines up. Because I'm not going to spend all of the time trying to understand the actual maths behind this, like I kind of have to take it at face value. But so long as I understand what's supposed to go where and what the intended result is and that kind of thing, like there's kind of a middle ground to be had. Like if you can understand all of that, by all means, copy code from somewhere and make it your own and change how it works. But if you don't for the life of you understand something, and like you're just copying something for the sake of copying it because you know it gets the result you want, you're going to run into a lot of issues. It's not going to be a sustainable way to program, and really not something you want to do. So obviously here now I need to change my definitions. I accidentally skipped a definition, so I'll undo that paste quick and rate it for that. And just oh, it has put it in the right place. Good. Right, so copy that in there. So I want to do, I basically just want to replace any reference to the y variables, because this is for the xz plane and not the xy plane now. I basically just want to do the same thing as I did for the circles and replace any reference to that appropriately. So like here, just change that to z, change that to z, to z, and so on. I mean, you guys have seen me do this before, so just a matter of being thorough and making sure you've not missed anything, because the last thing you want is for one variable to behave strangely and then later on in development, like, you know, build a UI feature, for example, and then not have it behave how you expect, and then think it's something wrong with like the UI implementation. So like, let's say I was to build a level editor for this, and I missed something in this code when I was copying it. It would be horrible to think that I could be stuck for ages obsessing over some mysterious bug that isn't actually there in like my UI code. So yeah, I'll just finish these off quick. And that one's important as well. Still want it to increment. So I'll just do a quick double check. Oh, and this needs changing as well. That needs to be Y center and Z. So I'll just do a quick double check just to make sure this is correct. So you see there, I nearly missed something. That would have been an issue if I'd have missed that. Now there should be absolutely no y's in this function other than down here. So I think I've done everything. I think that's everything there. That looks right to me. So now I'm going to do the same thing for down here. Oh, don't want that. Copy this again. But this time, same thing with the other ones. I'm simply changing all of the x references in this case to be Y references. So we're targeting a new plane. I love you. I mean, I probably shouldn't be highlighting it, but you've got an interesting name there in chat. Any tips? I love programming and want to work as a dev forever, but it does not hold my attention. Yes, I'm new to programming. So I actually have exactly the same issue. So I've been through pretty much exactly the same problem, and it's been an issue consistently. I don't think it ever goes away. But that's not necessarily to say that you can't do anything about it. So I've been educated as a programmer, so I've come up from GCSE level, which if you're not in the UK is basically like your secondary school, or I think it's I don't know what the US or foreign equivalent is, but it's basically like when you're doing your first properly like meaningful exams. So so yeah, that's an interesting point. If you don't know enough to be hooked on, then it can be difficult. Like C++ is a learning curve. So like I say, I've learned it from GCSE, but I didn't learn C++ specifically. That's the thing. I learned how to become a programmer first, and then moved on to C++. Now that's not to say that you can't learn C++ from scratch. I think it's actually a very good language to learn if you have the patience for it. And yeah, like Raz has just said in chat, it's helpful to have a dedicated place, and to some extent a dedicated obligation as well. Like if you've got something where you have to be there, and you have to make appearances, or you have to be reliable, or maybe you've made a commitment to yourself, whatever keeps you kind of going, it's important to have a place to be. So the issue that I'm having at the moment is recently having gone kind of independent, like I'm not at uni, I'm on my placement year. I have no real obligation to any like institution or anything like that, so it's very difficult to stay motivated. And actually the way I've decided to stay motivated is by doing these Twitch streams. So that's one way you can do it. Or if you can find a dedicated workspace, maybe like a cafe if you've got a laptop, but not everyone does. Or if you've got a library that you can go to that has the relevant software. Like having the software is important. If you don't have the software, it's a waste of your time going to a public building or something like that. So I guess, I don't know, I guess it's a general suggestion, but the best thing you can do for any work, if you find it difficult, is go to somewhere where either you can get support, that's one thing, or you have some kind of obligation to someone else or yourself to be there and to stay there every day. It doesn't have to be your entire day. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be slaving away for 8 hours like some people do, because it's hard to get to that point when it's not been your job for a very long time. Like in my case, I've decided I'm going to do Twitch streams every day for maybe 3-4 hours in an afternoon, just so that I can kind of relax a little bit, just so I can chill, and just so I can get into the flow of things. He says if you want to be so. No, I don't agree that you have to work 5 to 10 hours every day. If you want to be really good at C++, maybe. Like if you want to be an expert, like sure, do it 5-10 hours a day. But yeah, Raz is right again. Like there's so many things you can do. When I started at GCSE level, we were using, I think it was called Visual Basic, and you could do like basically nothing with this language other than draw lines to a window. And it did its job to get the concepts across, but it was only really an educational tool. And like Raz raises the point that if you want to do programming, like there's not just one programming route you can do, like there's multiple. So if you want to build games in an engine like I'm doing, but you want to have an easier time, you know, like I'm using Unreal right now, you can use Unity instead. So Unity is built around C# instead, which removes some of the technical overhead that you need to know about. So one thing that I'm dealing with, or can deal with, is pointers. And pointers are an interesting memory allocation tool, basically, for using variables and that kind of thing. So C# removes some of that, and it's a good place to start if you want to make games specifically. But you say that you're interested in cybersecurity, so you can enter that field, as far as I know, from many different ways, but the best way to do it is have some kind of formal education. Cybersecurity is a very weird field where unless you've got the relevant technical know-how and software, you're going to have a very tough time. You're going to have a very tough time basically on your own, working from home, doing that kind of thing. It is possible, don't get me wrong, but if, like you say, you're getting distracted easily and you're finding it hard to stay motivated, I would say working from home isn't the best thing to do, honestly. It's a very difficult question to answer, and it depends on your situation, but I hope that those are some kind of some rough things that you can do, maybe. It's not one size fits all. Maybe you can't afford to go and get some kind of education somewhere, and if that's the case, then your only option is to work from home. But it's important when you're starting out to work on something fun. You don't necessarily have to work on something complicated. And yeah, Hacker Rank is a really good way to get into it. So if you're struggling to learn a language and you want an easy start, and you want to be able to learn individual concepts from the ground up, Hacker Rank is a great place to go. How long does it take you to start understanding C++ and start building your own software? So there's kind of two parts to that question. There's the C++ part, which is all of your logical stuff, and then there's the UI part, and it depends on what framework you're using. If you're using a framework that is purely build it from scratch, you're going to have a difficult time. Like, it is possible to do DirectX programming, which is Windows based, and build your own applications, but I highly discourage doing that. You're better off using either something like a game engine or a program framework like Windows Forms, for example, but I think that's C# based, or using some kind of pre-built functions library. So you can, when you're doing C++, you can basically go out and download frameworks, and those frameworks are just essentially a collection of functions that you can employ to do a job. So in my case, I'm not using a library as such, but I do have access to the Unreal library, which is essentially a whole range of functions and tools and utilities that you can use to help you build games and interact with game objects. And that's one of the big things that I struggled with when migrating over to Unreal, is how to use their native kind of object handling system and the kind of nuances of that. So if you're interested in learning C++, start somewhere simple. Start with a framework or a project already built where you can quickly kind of put stuff out on the UI. You want to learn and get a job. Like, unfortunately, if that's what you want to do, you're not going to be able to do it quickly. It's not a quick thing you can do unless, like, your friend says you do work 5 to 10 hours a day and you have kind of a deadline in mind. C++ is a very nuanced language. It has a lot of features. It has a lot of quirks, and then when you're layering cybersecurity on top of that, that's a whole other area of expertise where you have to learn all kinds of different concepts and algorithms, basically, that are just a field of their own. Like, they're not even related to the language. C++ is just a tool, and it's how you use that tool that makes you a cybersecurity expert. So in my case, I'm obviously using it for games, which is nothing like what you would need. So I would highly recommend doing your own research, finding if there's any way to speed up the process, finding out if there's any resources or places you can go to help you learn what it is you're doing. Would I recommend it for you as a beginner? If you're having difficulty staying engaged, no. Honestly, if you're doing it from home and you can't concentrate, and maybe you're young or whatever and you just don't have the motivation to carry on doing it every day and you'd rather play games, don't go into programming as a field. I mean, I'm in the same boat, but thankfully, like, I'm 21 as well, but I have gone to college, I've gone to uni, and I still struggle with these problems, but thankfully, like, I've built up enough experience to be able to kind of cope with it better and to get more results. Like, if you were trying to get the same results as me, you'd get incredibly frustrated, because even though I'm doing very basic stuff right now, it's tough. If you're starting uni in October and you're going into cybersecurity, by all means, you can probably do it. There are some people on my course that started doing essentially uni with no previous programming experience, which, don't get me wrong, was difficult for them, but it is possible. And if you're willing to put in the hard work and you've got that support network there, you can do it. Like, it's not impossible. So if you're finding it difficult to stay motivated now, just dabble a little bit in C++. That's fair enough. Yeah, I know lots of people that have dropped out as well. And Raz, no, I'm not doing computer science. I'm doing computer science for games, which is slightly different. It's essentially the same thing, but with a few specialties, basically. So anyway, I hope that's helped to some extent. Like, I know it's difficult knowing what to go into. Oh, okay, fair enough, Raz. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a bit more perspective. Like, there are people that didn't know anything really going into my course, but they still managed to cut it because they were willing to put in a little bit extra time to learn the language from the ground up, and a lot of courses will teach you that. It will kind of be a bit of a shock to your system at first because you'll be learning a lot very quickly, but it is possible. So anyway, right, we'll get back onto what we were doing. So I think I've changed all of the appropriate parameters. So I've removed any reference to X, other than in the change voxel function, where I've replaced the traditional X parameter for the X center, just so it's centered on that axis. And I think that should be correct. Don't think I've got any more X references anywhere. Well, I shouldn't do anyway, so it'd highlight it, but yeah, that should be the only one. Right, so to test that, I'm going to go back up to the top, I'm going to go to my run function, I'll copy this a couple times, and let's see what it does. So that should do the same thing but on different axes with the same shape. So if I compile that, so we have made some slightly larger changes, so the compile time will take a bit longer. There we go. And hopefully, oh, it's done that thing again where it's not fully registered it. Right, so if we go back in here. Oh right, I've just not changed the function calls, of course, yeah. So we need XZ and YZ. And then let's try again. And just looking at chat, like, yeah, Raz, software dev is probably the best route for you to go. If you want to transition, so Flusher, if you want to transition into cybersecurity, software dev's the way to go, because it will give you the broadest understanding of how to build programs, essentially. And I know this is difficult advice for a lot of people, but you have to make the decision whether or not you want to listen to your parents or you want to believe 100% in what it is you're doing. When I initially committed to like fully doing IT and all of that kind of thing at A-level, a lot of the advice I was getting was like, no, diversify, do something a bit different just in case you don't like it and all of that kind of thing. If you know for a fact that it's what you want to do, and it is your passion, like you say, then no one should be able to tell you not to do it. You may struggle, like, I'm not going to pretend it will be easy to go into what it is you want to do, but if you want to do it, if you like watching people program, you like talking about it, and you want to do cybersecurity, go for it. Like, no one should be able to tell you what you should and shouldn't do at university. If that means that you're going to have issues with your parents, then that's a risk that you've kind of got to weigh up against your priorities. But like with programming, like building this now, like I'm happy that this works. You know, and it's all about trial and error. Every time you do something new, you're testing something completely different. Like, you have no idea if it's going to be successful or not. And if you need a new tool, for example, like in C++, there's so many things you can do. You generally just find it when you're researching what your use case is. So, like with making these circular voxels, I mean, you've probably watched me do it. Like, I had no idea how to do this equation here, this thing. Never touched it before. I'm not a mathsy person, probably couldn't come up with it myself. But with a bit of a Google search, which is your main tool as a programmer, you pick it up. Like, you kind of learn how it works. You go, oh, that's cool. Like, it's not as complicated as I might have thought it was, and then you implement it, you feel good that it works and everything. And don't worry, so am I. I'm the worst mathematician as well. Like, I said earlier, I don't know if you were in the chat then, but I didn't do maths at A-level or any real maths at uni, other than the stuff that I had to learn for the course. And yeah, I struggle, but a lot of the time you pick it up. A lot of programming is not maths based. Well, that's a lie. It's not heavily maths dependent, is what I should say, especially cybersecurity stuff. Your main concern will be working out the logic behind stuff, how things work, like what logical pathways your code is going to take and stuff like that. So it's a tough call, but if you want to do it, then do it. Like, it's not impossible. And once you've got that framework of support and resources at the university that you choose to go to, it's incredibly easy to pick it up if you're motivated to do it. If you have a tough time in general with motivation and that kind of thing, then that's something that you'll have to work on. But as far as uni goes, if that's the course you want to do, it's the course you want to do. Because if you're having motivational issues, you're going to have exactly the same problem on every course that you do. It's not just going to be, oh, programming's hard, I might, not be motivated to do it. It will be, oh, I've got this work to do, I'm not motivated to do it. So motivation helps no matter what it is you're doing. And like Fandangled says, problem solving is the biggest, or puzzle solving is essentially the biggest interest that will help you out with that. Like with this, like I went in today and my only objective was get spheres rendering like I've been doing today, like get circles going and that kind of thing. And I went from having a way to render tiles and sticks and cubes with smaller cubes to being able to represent ovals and circles and stuff like that. So and to your last question, like, or I guess it's not really a question, but to your last thing, if cybersecurity is the thing that you want to go into because you think it will be flashy and cool and glamorous, then don't do it, honestly, because a lot of it is just standard engineering, software engineering principles, but reapplied in a slightly different way. That's why going into general software engineering is the best way to go, because it will give you a broad overview of how stuff is built, how stuff in C++ interacts, for example, if that's the language that you use, how to program in general as a discipline, how to be able to Google search properly, which is something that a surprising amount of people can't do. And then once you've got all of those skills, then you learn how to do cybersecurity, because it's a subcomponent of programming. It's not separate to it. So you have to really like to be able to program first. That's the important thing. And again, like motivation, you have to have motivation no matter what course you do. So ultimately it's up to you and your best judgment, but don't not do it just because you're scared. If your course offers a way to go from no programming to being a fully competent programmer, then you'll be more than supported if you're motivated to complete that course and do your masters. So again, it's your call, but it's probably not as bad as you might think. And if your parents are a bit tech phobic like mine are, and many people's are, they might not quite understand it and they might be a little bit afraid of it, but ultimately it shouldn't be a problem for you. So I hope that helps, and I'm not going to say too much more about it because I don't think there's much more I can add, but it's important, I think, to get more people interested in programming and that kind of thing, so I thought I'd speak about it a little bit anyway. But yeah, essentially now with my code, I've done all of my ellipses, and the next big problem is spheres. Now, a slight adaptation from the other stuff that I've done, but I think it will be a challenging one, especially with ellipsoids. That's the biggest thing I'm concerned about, because this equation that I was relying on before will probably change completely. So we will actually have to spend the time to figure it out. The sphere itself shouldn't be as bad, to be honest. So we can go up to the circle code that we had. And I'm assuming it's as simple as adding an additional parameter, but I almost guarantee that won't be the case. So let's copy this, go to the XY one. So most of this will remain the same, to be honest. The only additional thing that I'm going to have to do is, well, I say the only, I mean there's a few things, but one of the main things I'm going to have to do, add an additional for loop, and then essentially add to that in the, utilize that in the change voxel function. So we're doing the Z center. We also need an additional parameter up here. So again, we're using the ternary operator to work out whether or not our position that we're using is odd or even, and then we're returning the appropriate offset. If there isn't, if it's odd, then obviously the center of the object will be the block that has been selected and nothing else. But if it's an even number, then we'll need to make the center of that sphere offset slightly, just so that it's in between blocks rather than just the block itself. So that's all we're doing with that. So we've added the for loop. Now I think to make this work, might be completely wrong, but we take this, we add, we basically create another one, another part to this if statement, change it all to be including the Z parameter as well. And then because it's in 3D, my assumption might be wrong, but I think we just add an additional multiplication of the radius onto this right hand part of the comparator. And then rather than do Z center, we can just simply do Z. So we're using essentially the additional variable that we've now exposed to this function to determine what position of the cube we're addressing now. I think that's everything. I think I've done everything right. I don't think I've missed anything when I'm copying and pasting. So let me just double check it, make sure I've not messed anything up. Y, so we've got all our Zs, Z, Z, additional radius, we'll place that in there. Should be good. Now we can test it, so we can do sphere, and then obviously we want to put it slightly out the way, so we'll do 10, 10, and I can't remember what max world size I've got. I think it's 40. Yeah, it is. So we'll put it at about 30, and then just make sure that the radius is no larger than 20, which it won't be, but so that's what we've got to do. So the int diameter, we'll make it 10 as well, I guess, just to make sure that the even number code is working properly. We'll do 1, 1 just as default parameter types because we haven't built that functionality yet. And that should be everything for that bit of code. We'll compile that again. So let's see, it's certainly lagging, so I think I've got something somewhere. and it's a cube for some reason, which isn't good. I assume that's because it shouldn't have been just a matter of multiplying the radius 3 times. I think it thinks that the area we're checking is larger, so you know what, let's revert it to having 2 radiuses. That might just be okay. That might be fine, to be quite honest, because we are just checking essentially if it's within the bounds of the circle. So let's get rid of that additional multiplication and compile it again. And play it. Yeah, I mean, that's looking kind of correct, actually. I think that works. I'm really surprised it does, but I think that works. That's pretty cool. So we've gone from having basically just circles to having ovals in voxels, which is really cool. I guess to test it properly, what we can do, just to make sure it makes sense visually, I mean, it looks okay, but just to make a proper circle, we'll just increase... Oh no, we can't do that yet, can we? So it's not a what's it called? An ellipsoid. So when I built the ellipsoid functionality, I'll test it at double height so I can see what it looks like as a complete circle. But yeah, that's cool. And I think actually the sphere will be a big component of terrain brushes and that kind of thing, so it's quite fundamental that that's working. I know it's obviously important to have some of the other things like planes and columns and all of that, but in terms of terrain building, sphere will be by far the most versatile tool. So I will see if I can maybe get something close with this, with doing the ellipsoid, and then I think I'm going to call it for the day. So I've actually done quite a lot today. We've got quite a lot of the voxel brushes working. So where to begin? I believe it should be a simple matter of doing what I did up here with the ellipse and finding the right combination of equation variables. Essentially how we did the standard ellipse and not the ellipsoid. So I will copy the code for the sphere, because that's the closest thing to it essentially, and then we're just updating this as well as including some additional variables for the diameters for the different dimensions. So if we copy this 3 times, and then in fact I'll copy it from up here so it's a bit easier. There we go, and then change that to Z. Oh no, X, Y, Z. There we go. And then obviously we need to update these. Oh no, sorry, my bad. We need to use the diameter instead, because that's the thing that we're actually checking for even or oddness. Copy those in. And then we need to update each of the 4 loops to now use the independent variables. and also update. What did we have? So what did we have for the ellipse? So for the ellipse we had we essentially had the same thing. I don't think it matters if I add that in. Yeah, I don't think I need to do any like addition like I did originally think I needed to do. I think I just need to add or minus from the original radius. So again, if I'm basically just copying the X, Y and Z radius across here to the max range, then we should be okay. Now the biggest change here is, of course, this part of the function. This is by far the most complex adjustment that I think I will need to make, simply because the old way of doing it will no longer work, because the radius is different now than it was previously, because we've obviously got three different parameters, all potentially scaled slightly differently, so I can't just add an additional component to this. Whereas before I could leave it as just radius times radius, now I've got to work out how to scale radius x, radius y, radius z. And this part of the component is going to change completely, because I'm now mixing 3 parameters rather than the conventional 2. So this is going to get interesting, and I'm going to have to do some more research like I did in the first place. So I'm sure using the resource that I used before, there's got to be some way of doing it, and I guess I'll just use that and try and find out. So you guys will have to bear with me while I do some more off-screen stuff, but I'm still happy to talk to people if people put stuff in chat. Could I link my resource? So the thing that I was using for my circles before was simply this link here. So that basically just showed me how to do it for irregular, like circles, well, ellipses. Which should hopefully give you a kind of idea of how to do it for things like spheres, if you're doing that kind of thing, or if you're just curious. Basically just to take the same principle and adjust it slightly. So it seems like it's not actually that I don't think it's that different from how it was before. Did I square my parameters? For which function? I believe so. So this was for the ellipse one. So yeah, to square them, I obviously just multiplied it by itself. Same for here as well. I think basically a similar principle applies to the other equation for the thing that I'm trying to do at the moment. I think I basically use the same thing, but with an additional dimension added on. So I'm gonna try that, because by the looks of it, that is the case. Because I found a Stack Overflow question asking the same thing about ellipsoids, and the formula follows a very, very similar format to this. So currently I'm trying to work out the equation for finding out if a point lies within the boundaries of an ellipsoid in a given cube. So we take a cube's dimensions, and then we put the center point in the middle of that, and then generate a sphere, or in this case an ellipsoid, based on the width, height, and depth. So I'm going to copy this code from my ellipse code, plug it into here, and then add an additional x parameter. So I'll take everything before this plus. I mean, if this works, it's a miracle, but yeah, we can hope. Change everything up to that plus to x. And see if that works. Thinking about it, actually, it would make sense, because as you move further away from the, well, in this case the YZ plane, as you move further away from it in like an arc, these components would get smaller as this one gets bigger, so it would all be kind of relative to one another, and it would always be less than 1 if it's inside the boundary. So I believe this would work. So give that a go. I need to call the function so I can see if it works or not. So change voxel ellipsoid should take similar parameters to the sphere, and I'll put it in the same place actually just because I know it works. Comment out the sphere code, and then I need to put in, I believe it's the dimensions. Yeah. So I want the, I don't know, let's say 10, 20, 10 again, just to see if it's actually working properly. Put a placeholder material and shape ID in, format it all properly, and I guess that would work. I mean, I can kind of see it working. I can't see why it wouldn't. So, see. I mean, yeah, I can't believe it's working, but it looks like it is. That's pretty cool. Let me just check like the width and everything, just to make sure it's at least in the right ballpark. So 5 in that direction, sorry, 10 across, and yeah, it's actually the right shape, which is surprising. So what I'm going to do, test it at doing double height, because that was something I was curious to see, like if it would actually look like a proper sphere if I double the height, because it should, because it's made out of half blocks. But I know that the precision will be slightly off for the other side, so we'll see how that goes. Let's see. Yeah, I mean that it looks like a sphere to me, so that's pretty cool. I'm actually really happy with this. I know it's lagging a lot, but that's just because I've not done my performance culling yet, which is something that I'll address at a later date when I start doing the UI work. But I'm honestly quite impressed with that. I'm quite happy with it. I hope you guys have got a lot out of it as well, because like I say, I'm going to be coming off shortly, so I guess I'll hang around for a little bit if you guys want to chat. But for now, I'm going to call it a day, I guess, on the programming front. I've made a lot of progress, so I'm really happy with that. What I'll do is I'll save out of everything. Make sure everything's closed. Last thing I want is to not have saved all of my work. Put it in. Right, yeah. Before I come off, if any of you guys have got questions or you want to know what the future of this space is going to look like, or you want to like follow or whatever before I go, then by all means, like, go ahead. It would be a big help actually if some of you followed, if you're interested in this kind of thing. And the content's only going to get more complex and more interesting as this project moves forward. So don't think that I'll be working on this kind of boring stuff all the time. Thanks for the follow, man. Eventually, after a while... Oh, and yeah, thanks again for the follow. Wow. It actually means a lot to me that people are following on my first day. Like, it's crazy. I didn't think that people would be that engaged with programming stream, but I guess people are, so... Yeah. It's pretty mad. Thanks, guys. It means a lot. Like I say, if you've got any questions or anything like that, I'll hang around for a bit. So, and just to reiterate as well, I'll be trying to do consistent streams. I'm gonna try and aim currently for weekdays and see how that goes at the same time. So I will be starting probably around 2, maybe either earlier or a little bit later, depending on what other people suggest or what people want. Like if I find I'm getting a lot of viewers around this time instead of earlier, then I'll adjust my schedule slightly so that I'm getting as many of you guys following as I can, so that people aren't missing out on anything. But yeah, every day on a weekday, with the exception of tomorrow, as I have a business meeting, which actually is quite important for this year's development. So I will try and get back as soon as I can, and if I'm too tired I won't stream, but I might do some additional work on the channel, maybe adjust some plugins if things aren't quite how they need to be, that kind of thing. And I've just noticed as well, actually, we've hit the follower goal, which I thought we'd hit in 3 weeks in a single day on my first day of streaming, which is crazy. So I'll adjust that obviously to make a new target, but thanks a lot, guys. It's been really good. So I guess I'll wrap it up there unless there's anything last minute, but thanks guys for, I guess, joining me doing this. I know it's not the most engaging thing to be doing sometimes, staring at code, so I appreciate it's not always the most fun thing to watch. I hope I've made it a bit more interesting. So I guess I will see you the same time. I'll try aim for Friday, I suppose, or even tomorrow if I get the opportunities. Thanks a lot, guys. See you next time.